Hi all, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I was in the wrong room. That's very strange. Thank you, Heather, for letting me know. Otherwise, I was wondering why no one was here.
There's 7 of us. We're here.
That is awesome. Did anyone leave?
I don't know.
I hope I didn't lose anyone. I apologize. I'm not sure what happened. Okay, but we are here and we are good to go. So and we're recording. Let me get the chat up in case. All right. So, okay. So I'm going to start over. We had started here. So I'm Suzanne Joaquim. I'm the OER coordinator for Butte Community College here in Northern California. Later on, you're going to meet Rachel Artiega. She's our librarian and also working on the OER project. So we're going to be leading this session together. And I'm staring at myself. I'll stare out here. So this course began as a workshop for folks at Butte. And in the spirit of open, I thought I'd share it out with anyone that was interested. So I'm super thrilled that there are other folks that are joining us. That is lovely. And if maybe we could begin with some introductions. So if folks that are online can begin, you can unmute yourself and let us know who you are, what you teach, and where you teach.
I'm happy to start. Suzanne, did everyone in the room already introduce themselves?
We'll do it again. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm Heather Springer. I teach in the English department. Real interested in OER, especially for critical thinking, which has kind of an expensive text.
Excellent. Who wants to go next? Rob?
Can do that. My name is Rob Newman. I'm an adjunct at Glendale College down in LA. I teach aviation and entrepreneurship, not at the same time, but I do get to teach the fun stuff. And actually, I'm looking at possibly writing an open book for entrepreneurship.
Nice. Excellent. Can folks hear pretty much? Okay. And am I being too loud?
No, it's okay.
Okay, good. Barry?
Yes, I teach at, actually I teach with up at Kern online, the LACCD in Los Angeles. I teach at LA Mission and East LA College and also at College of Canyons in Valencia. And I teach law and classes.
Excellent, thank you. Sandy? Sandy, I think you turned on your video, but not the audio. Oh, and then I'll introduce, so Cynthia and Natasha are from East Los Angeles College, and they're both librarians. Fabulous. If folks can see the chat, it's a good thing to open. I'm going to put some links in just a second. And we have James Aird, who's an instructional technology consultant at Chico State. Oh, nice. Right down the road. Hi.
My problem is it would be cool, man. Shoot up.
Okay, so I think we had some feedback. Barry? Nope. Let's see. Let's mute. If you,
I don't have a question.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead. You had a question, you said?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. All right. So I think everyone, Alfred, are you going to introduce yourself? All right. So let me start by putting in a few links that you're going to need for the workshop. So give me just a second to get those up. Okay. So if you're taking these workshops for Flex, if you could please click on the link there that I put to the Google form, and it'll ask questions, so fill it out. We're going to use the same form for all of the workshops. It'll be date stamped, so we'll know which one you're signing up for. So this will be how you get your Flex. I've had a few of the professional development departments from different colleges ask for this, so I'm just going to send them the spreadsheet, and that's how they'll collect that. The other important link is the Canvas course. So let me put that in.
Susan, are we supposed to be in Canvas also, or just the Zoom conference? Because I don't see what I see the screen, but I don't have access to it because I haven't opened Canvas. Are we supposed to open the Canvas course?
In a little bit. You don't need it just yet.
Okay.
So you're seeing my screen?
Right, I can see it, but when you talk about the links, they're not hot links for.
Oh, I got you. So the links, to get to those, you want to open the chat. So in the Zoom, there should be a 3 dots.
Oh, okay, I see it. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've put the link to the Canvas shell there as well. Now, this isn't a California Canvas instance. It's actually the public version of Canvas. So you'll have to create a new account and sign in that way. If you're just doing this for Flex Credit and just attending the workshops, the Canvas shell has some useful information, but if you want the full certificate, you're going to want to get onto Canvas to complete the assignments. Randy?
I think we left the 2 off of your URL stream there for Canvas.
For the Canvas? Oh, very good. Let me.
112.092.
I sure did. Thank you. Yeah, let me put the link in. Let me try the Canvas link. Oh, Cynthia did. Awesome. Thank you. So Cynthia's got the right link there. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, good. So if you're doing the certificate, let me show you what is going to be in the Canvas course that you'll need. And I apologize for folks out here. We're going to just redo this bit. So let me get to screen sharing. Okay. So can everyone see my Canvas screen? Oops. No.
Yes, I can.
Fabulous.
I can see it just fine.
Excellent. Whoops. Come on. Really? All right. Let me get the chat up so I've got that. Perfect. Okay. Now we're ready to roll. So what the Canvas shell has is a bunch of information that we've been building out. And I say we, but this has been mostly Rachel building this, so I can't take very much credit for it. If you're doing the certificate, there are also homework assignments here. And the first one, the one for this week, is to look at other training resources that are available outside of this shell here. So this is the second time we've taught this course, and we're building out the course, but there's a lot of other great places to get training resources. So what we're going to have folks do is pick one of the ones that are shown there, write a review in something like a Google Doc or some other place where you can share it out, and then link to it here. Now, as long as you're registered as a student, you'll be able to edit this page. This is editable by both teachers and students. If you're just looking at this without logging in, you won't be able to edit, however. Okay. Any questions on the kind of structure of the course, the workshops, the Canvas shell, any of that? Are we all pretty good?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What kind of time commitment do you think is involved with the activities in the Canvas shell?
Excellent. So my hope is not very much, because I know we're all busy, and I'm hoping these are, 1, not kind of busy work, and 2, don't take too much time. It's a pretty much whatever is most useful for you. So this first assignment is looking at other places where you can go to get information. So find one that seems interesting to you and learn what you can out of it, and then report back. I'm not looking at how long the reviews are. I'm not really looking for any of that, those sorts of details. I just want it to be useful. And then next week's assignment is going to be searching for content for your own course. And so that may take a little bit more time, but hopefully that's useful for you because it's for your own classes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I don't see pages in the course navigation. Oh, yeah, I've turned off pages. If you go to modules, I think that's a cleaner way to find it. I think mine ended up clicking onto pages because I'm in instructor view. but it should all be under modules. Okay. Excellent. Other questions? All right. So I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the introductions here so that we can kind of get to content. So the way the workshops are set up is this first workshop is a kind of an overview of what open is, how it relates to both education, to libraries, and to a few other areas of society. So this is a broad overview. Next week, we're going to get into some of the more nuts and bolts details. So we'll look at how do you search for content for your own courses. I think that's probably what most folks are really wanting to get into. So we'll spend a fair bit of time on searching, as well as learning what the licenses all mean so that you know what you can do with the content that you find. On November 17th, we'll be talking about accessibility, and I'm currently working on getting a guest presenter who has some math skills in accessibility and instructional design, so I'm hoping that'll go through. Either way, we will talk about how to make sure that the content you find and the content you create is accessible for your students. And then on December 8th, we'll talk about either open pedagogy or ancillaries, or if there's something that you really want to learn about, if some questions come up, that day is fairly flexible. So if you have ideas, let me know and we can cover that instead. All right, so let us move on. Questions? We good? Andy, did you have a question earlier?
My internet doesn't connect, so
Okay.
do I need to get on the internet?
Not today. So you don't need internet today, but yeah, that's a really good point. For next time, because we're going to be doing hands-on searches, if y'all want to bring your computers, and we'll make sure it's connecting properly. All right, so let's start with, and since my computer skills are working so well, I'm going to try a poll, which is exciting. First time I've tried polls in Zoom. Can you all see it online, the poll there? So we're gonna, I couldn't do both. So if you're online, don't ask follow-up questions, all right. If you're online, you should be able to take the poll. If you're in the room here, you may just want to think about how much do you know about OER? So that's always a good place to start, right? How much do we know about this information? Everything from I'm not aware to I've heard about it, but I don't know much about it. Kind of know about it, but I'm not sure what to do with it. I'm aware of it, and then I'm very aware. Excellent. Okay, so we seem to be about in the mid-range, so ranging from kind of aware to mostly aware, and that's great. I would imagine that if you were at the very bottom there, then this would be mostly a waste of time. Oh, let me turn this off, sorry. Oh. Can we access poll? How can we access the polling? I don't, yeah, you know, the polling should just pop up. So I think what happens is if you have pop-ups blocked, the polls in the Zoom don't seem to work. I think that's what we discovered last time. So these are mostly just for fun. Yeah, so I think it just pops up on its own. Good. So let me do a new share, hold on. Where's my Oh, my PowerPoint. Oh, all right, so let me get, why is my PowerPoint not here, really? All right, 1 second. Oh, you're not gonna let me, really? Okay. Stop sharing, there you are. Okay, let me get my presentation and we'll move forward from there.
Suzanne, I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are several dates of attendance. You know, what if, can we still log into the other ones or will we be lost?
Oh, if you miss one, no, the workshops are all self-contained, so you're welcome to log in to whichever ones you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so no, that wasn't the one. There. All right, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
I can see it just fine.
Perfect, thank you. All right. And stop it. Shit. All right. And can you see both graphs online?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, Butte College is doing well, huh?
Yes, we are. So, yeah, this is a survey that we conducted last year, and this was actually last year before the big push on information. So, yeah, we did really well, where we asked faculty how much they knew about open textbooks, and we also asked them about their textbook choices and what was important to them. And I'm going to share some of that data as we go through. This survey was based on a nationwide survey done by the Babson Group, where they asked the same questions. And so I just cut and pasted their survey and used it for our purposes. Now that is, of course, the beauty of open, right? They published it under an open license, so I could do that without plagiarizing. As long as I attribute them, which is why I said this is the Babson survey. See how that works? Fabulous. So notice that most faculty nationwide are not aware. So the yellow, over half are not aware at all. And then a few are aware, and very, very few are very aware of what OER is. And so that's why the state of California gave us some money so that we could start informing our faculty about what all this is, so that they can make a decision for their courses in addition to just picking textbooks from publishers. All right. So the definition for open educational resources is that OER are teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain and are released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. So that's the official definition. What's important here is that they're teaching and learning materials and the licensing. So what makes a lot more sense to me is this form of understanding what OER is. OER allows you 5 R's, so 5 permissions that is different from other types of licensing. Let me move this out of the way so folks here can see. All right. First one is retain. So content that is openly licensed means that you can download it and keep it for as long as you like. So can your students, right? So the idea is they can download the textbook and they never have to sell it back. They have it forever. Reuse means you can use it in a variety of ways. So I may want to print it. I can do that. I may want to change the format. I may want to put it in my Canvas shell. I can do all of that. I can pretty much do whatever I want with it. I can also revise it, meaning I can change it in a way that suits my class. So if I find 2 resources, and this happens a lot, this is actually what we did in our human anatomy, human biology class, is there was one resource that was pretty good, but it was missing a lot of information, and so we started pulling from other places. Now, as long as both of those resources are open, you can do that, right? So that's the adapt, modify. You can add things, you can delete things. Remixing is combining, and then redistributing is you can share it out with your students. And what's really nice is you can also share it out in paper form through the bookstore. So it doesn't all have to be electronic. So lots and lots of options. Okay. So I wanted to share a little bit more about our survey that we gave faculty and asking them about how they choose their textbooks. So 95% of Butte faculty said that cost is important when selecting material. And I should mention the nationwide survey had similar numbers, so we are neither, we're not that special, sorry. We did about as well as anybody else did. So most faculty say cost is important, but only 38% are satisfied with the cost of their textbook, right? So we know there's a problem, and I think for a long time we've had this feeling of helplessness, maybe, like, okay, what are you going to do? Like the textbooks, I know for biology, I had a choice between 100 and 150 and 200, and like, okay, that's all expensive, but what are my options? And that's one of the reasons that OER began, is people started saying, well, no, I want options. Like, I'm not just going to roll over. What are my choices? And that's what we'll talk about in a bit. Now, the flip side of this is when you ask faculty about how satisfied they are with the textbook itself, the quality, the writing, the pictures, all of that, very high levels of satisfaction. So 65 to 80% say they're satisfied with all these different aspects that I asked them about. So we like our books, they're just too expensive. Only about 10% of faculty, however, have used open materials as a required resource in their course. Now, this has changed quite a lot for us. We've gone from, I think, about 6 to about 20 faculty that are using them, so this number really shifted in only a year, and that's because we started informing people about what are these and where do I find them. And so I think that'll change once people start knowing what OER actually is. A few more, 17% use open as supplemental. And I think that's a nice way to start. So if you're feeling like you're not quite sure if this resource is good enough for your class, use it as an option. That's how I started. I actually had a biology book, and there was an open book that I was involved in writing. But what I did is I said, well, you know what, pick. I didn't want to just shift whole, all the way right away. So I gave my students a choice between the two. And then I was able to look at how did they do based on which book they picked. And, not to give away the end of the story, they did fine either way. So I moved to the open book. Yeah.
Isn't that a big challenge though, teaching to 2 books?
Yes, I have a very different teaching style. And if we talk about open pedagogy at the very end, I'll talk about how that worked for me and actually why I thought that worked better than my old way of doing things. But if you don't want to do it straight to that, choose 2, you can tell them, here's the book that we're using in the class. Here's a free resource. It's supplemental. That way you don't feel like you have to cover both. And actually, one of the reasons, by the way, I still offer my students a choice of multiple textbooks for the class. One of the reasons is because I found that we all kind of connect with different books. I did this survey a few years ago. I was going to pick a new textbook for my class, and I thought, well, I know what I like. What do the students like? So I had them evaluate the books, and I was going to be very modern and let them choose, and whatever one won, that's the book I would use. And there was no winner. Every student had a different favorite for a different reason, and so I realized in the end, everyone has something that works for them and something that doesn't, so why not give them the choice? But that's much further than we're that's much further than we're taking it today. Yeah, that'll be on week 4. So last one. And this one I thought was interesting. 21% said they were not sure if the material they used were open. One of the interesting things I've been finding is a lot of us are using materials that we find online, which we assume are open, but may not actually be legally available, right? And so that's where it's nice to know about the licensing, because just because it's online doesn't mean that you're supposed to be using it. So good to get that information out there as well. All right, so let's do another poll. How much does your book cost? You want to continue? Yes. And polling. Okay, can I do another? Oh, I see, let's do it this way. All right, so game number 2, and this is our last polling. So how much does your book cost? And for those that are here, you can just think the number quietly. Ooh, we have someone using open. Fabulous. Okay. So we're hovering about $50 to $100. That's not bad. Depending on what you teach, books can get a lot more expensive than that. I know for biology, our books range in the 150 to 200. Not to pick on chemistry, but I can't remember, or maybe it was physics was 300. I mean, there's some really pricey books out there. Let's see. Almost all of my classes use exclusively, this is from Sandy, exclusively OER, but prior to that, books for the course were 50 to 100. Nice. That's lovely. And folks have already moved to OER. That's good. So yeah, books are expensive, and we all know, we all kind of know that. And from Rob, we have I stopped requiring a new book. Yeah, and that is one way that a lot of faculty kind of get around that, is the new editions really aren't that different, right? And so we allow old editions. And that is a way to help students save money. Law course, yeah, for law, more than $350, I believe it. If there's only one option, right, we don't have any econ folks in here, right, but if it's a monopoly, they can kind of charge what they want, and that's been where it's been going. So last year, I can't remember, for Open Ed Week, it was probably last year, Rachel put up a sign in the library asking students to report on how much they spend on books per semester. So in this highly scientific study, you can see that for Butte students, it seems to range about $400 a semester. Now, this doesn't ask how many units they take, which makes a big difference. But it is significant. And here's the real why this matters. So expensive is one thing, but education has a value, books have a value. It's not that they should all be free always, but the real issue is that the cost of books has increased far beyond the cost of other things. So this graph shows the overall consumer price index, followed by the next one up is the housing bubble. There's the housing bubble. That's the housing prices. Sorry, I'm still struggling with that. That was a rough time for a lot of folks. Followed by that, medical costs, right? So we all know how much medical costs have been increasing and how harsh that is for a lot of folks that need those. And then, but notice textbooks way beyond that, like just way beyond that. And that is really one of the reasons that this all started, is the publishers were able to charge whatever they wanted. And I'm not going to go into economic explanations because I'm just going to get in trouble that way. But the idea is, if the people that pick the thing are not the people that pay for the thing gets very expensive, right? So that is my, other than supply and demand, that is my economic knowledge in a nutshell. So who does this affect? So the cost of books is a problem, but a lot of times when I talk to faculty, we hear things like, well, it's $30 on Amazon. And yes, it is. But do the students know? Can they get to Amazon? Do they have the ability to do that? And I don't think I have it here, but we did a survey asking our anatomy students, which is the first semester class for pre-nursing, and then our micro students, which is the last semester class for pre-nursing, where they buy their books. And over time, they do figure out about Amazon, but they don't at first. The other people that don't know about, and there's other ones, Chegg.com, I'm not, making advertisements for Amazon here, but the other folks that don't know about those places to get cheaper books are first-generation students. In that survey we did of our anatomy and micro students, we asked them, where do you buy your book? And then we asked them why. And a lot of them said the bookstore, because the bookstore, right? I mean, like, where are you going to go to get your book? Like the bookstore. And so they just don't know. And those are the students that end up paying a lot for their books. And first-generation students oftentimes are the ones that can't afford it also. And so what you see here is when we asked our students at Butte how much they pay per semester for their books. And by the way, if anyone is interested in doing this survey, this was, again, a copy of a survey done by Florida. which was openly licensed. So I took their survey and asked our folks. I gave our students multiple choice, and these ranges were way too broad. So if anyone's interested in doing this, I highly suggest you actually let the students type in how much they spend, and then also ask them how many units they take. So take this graph with a grain of salt, but the one thing to notice is that the blue line, which is the first generation students, tend to pay a little bit more than the non-first generation students. The table up in the upper right here is another study that was done. This was not done here, but one that I found online, where they did consider units as well, and they found that first generation students tended to pay about $10 more per unit for their course materials. So it does have some equity outcomes that are problematic.
Are the bookstore people there supportive of OER? Or?
That's a really great question. So our bookstore, the question was, is the bookstore supportive of OER? And our bookstore has been tremendously supportive. So for those of you that work with Lori in the bookstore, she has been one of the best allies because she understands that this is what's good for students. Now, keep in mind that OER does not mean that the bookstore isn't able to sell the book, right? They're able to sell the book and still make a profit so that they can keep their doors open, but the book that they're buying is cheaper to begin with, so the cost to the students is cheaper. So for our human biology book, we found a print shop that'll print color-bound, beautiful book. And I think for the students, it ends up being $42, something like that. I think it was like $38 to the bookstore. So they're not making, you know, huge profits, but they can make a little bit.
I was a student, she was amazing. She had to have a hard copy, and she was like, wow, I didn't think that would be in color. So it was nice. We got lucky. So if anyone's interested in that print shop, send me an email and I'll connect you to them. We have a print shop on campus, but it was going to be a lot more expensive to have it printed in color. So yeah, that was a really nice find. Okay.
What's the turnaround time for something like that?
Great question. So that particular print shop is in the Bay Area somewhere. So the turnaround time is about 5 to 10 days, which does set up some kind of problems for our bookstore. And again, we're really lucky that Lori is willing to work with us because she has to guess how many they're going to be, buy it so they're here in time, and they're non-returnable. So that's the big downside. So what we do is we'll order enough to have the first day, we'll order about 5% of the course. So what we found here, and it may be different elsewhere, but for us, some of the courses that use free digital resources, about 5% of students want to buy paper copies. Others, it's up to 20%. So our bookstore is figuring out for which courses does she buy more and for which does she buy less. So we'll have enough for at least many of the students that want it, but then when we run out, it's going to be a 5-day turnaround. The nice thing is, and the big thing that's different between this and the publisher books is the students have it for free online. So it's not like they don't have it. And if it's really important for them to get chapter 1, you can print chapter 1 on paper, black and white, and give it to those students that want it because you can, right? It's fully allowed. And I've done that as well. Other places have also used something like Amazon, CreateSpace. Is another way that you can self-publish, and students would buy it there through their 2-day shipping. That ended up being a little bit more expensive, but it's a faster turnaround time. And you could do both, really. Like, there's nothing preventing you from having multiple publishers printing this for you.
What was again, Amazon what?
CreateSpace.
Other Amazon Plus.
I know it. And I already sold my stock, so it's too late to plug for that.
Well, I love Amazon too. So.
I know, it's hard not to. It's so easy.
Prime membership.
So are the folks online having any questions? Folks here have questions? Are we? Pretty
It
good.
looks great to me. No questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Heather. All right. So next survey. It's all nice. It's all well and good to hear about what faculty said, but we really want to know what students say. And so I gave our students a survey asking them about their textbook choices. And one of the questions said, has the cost of textbooks caused you to do any of the following? And yeah, maybe, there we go. 31% of students said that they actually take fewer classes because of the cost of the textbook. So if we just pause for a minute here, this is almost a third of students who are not taking classes because the textbook costs for other classes. When I talk to administration, this is really the only number I tell them. Because like what else, right? I mean, if we're talking retention and completion, that's a big chunk. But if we think about student progression, this means that they're finishing slower. It's already hard to get out in 2 years. This is taking longer. About the same number, so 27% actually select the course that they're not going to register for because the book was too expensive. And what was really interesting, since we started showing these numbers here, I was talking to one of our deans who was sitting out at the Ask Me tables. The first day of class, we have our deans sit out and answer questions from students. And she actually overheard a student saying, oh, I'm going to have to drop that class because this book was, you know, $300 or whatever it was. And so it was this real kind of instant verification of this is actually happening to our students. Okay. 16% of students drop or withdraw from a course because of the textbook. So they find that they can't afford the book and they can't complete the class without the book, so they drop it. 40% try the class, yeah, without the textbook. And we all know, right? We all have these students and they're in our class and they're kind of, why don't you have the book yet? Well, you know, they probably can't afford it. And it's not on here, but about half of those don't pass. You know, like, surprise, right? And so again, that's holding them back, that's affecting their GPA, but that's a choice that they have to make. About 76%, so a good percentage of them do know that they can buy it elsewhere. So that's a heartening number. And a lot of them, 22 isn't that much, but a good percentage go to the library and use the reserves. So that is something that a lot of us do, and it is a good option for students, but you know that you get, what, 2 hours? Most of the reserves are? An hour. And, yeah, and what can you really do in an hour or two? Sometimes overnight, but then only one student can use it. So it's a good option, but it's not necessarily the best answer. All right. 32% share books with friends or classmates, which I thought was quite ingenious, right? So we can work together and share the book. And then we also asked them I always have a fill in the place for them to write if they choose. And a few of them said they just go into debt. This was a kind of common answer, which, you know, they said, well, I borrow money from my friends and family. I use my credit card, you know, like I need to, especially when you need the class for your program, right? Like if that's what you need, that's what you got to do. And fortunately, not too many, only 2 out of the 300 students said that they illegally download copies, which is actually really easy. There's a lot of places to get the illegal PDFs of these books, but not something I would recommend as a solution. Okay, a little bit more about students. 59% said they purchase 1 or more textbooks per semester that they don't use, which, and we've all had this, right? Like, let's be honest, we've all had that class where you buy the book and you don't really need it. And I think part of the reason is that a lot of faculty assume you have to have a textbook. And in some departments, they do say you have to. And if your department says you have to, then that's something to consider. But maybe you don't. Find out. Like if you don't need a book, find out if you have to force them to buy the book. I've actually moved away because for a lot of things, the information is all online. And so I prefer to lead them to where they can find the answer than to give them the answer in a giant tome, right? But just something to consider. The next 2 ones are also something to consider as you make your textbook choices. About half the students say they use or would use digital books, and about half say they prefer to read on paper. So that's back to the question of how many paper do we copy. It's interesting, half say they prefer paper, but when it comes down to it and you have to shell out the $50, only about 20% will do so. And that's in our biology class where pictures matter, right? Where the colored pictures really matter. The 5% is in econ, where you can do a lot of that online. And so the econ class is only about 5% of students will buy those books. So it depends on, I imagine in your class you're going to have more because you've got to have those, the pictures and the diagrams. So it depends on the class type.
You give it to them in a format that's easily printable out in case they want to print certain pages of the text.
Yes, so most of the open textbooks will give you an option of how to view it. The one we're using, you can view it online or you can download a PDF. And most of them will have that option. A few of them are even better than that. They'll give you the option for all the different readers so you can pick which one you like. And if they don't, I would highly recommend, if it's only digital, I would highly recommend you make the PDF and make that available for students. It takes some time, but that is a really great choice for them.
So do you have a lot of students in your class bringing their tablets or laptops to see their book during the first period?
I teach online, so I'm gonna defer that to Mandy. Do you have students that bring their computers to look at the book?
Out of 23, 2 students. Okay. I teach in the computer lab.
So they probably would.
Yeah, and more each year. Students are using the ebook, which I love to see because we have wide screens. You can put ebook on half and Excel or Word, whatever software we're using in that class, and it's so beautiful and they love it. We have the touch screen, so well, I do have a student this semester who can't afford the book, but he put the ebook on his phone and works from that in class.
Yeah.
Of course, she's young and got great glasses.
And a lot of students do read it on their phone. I mean, we did a question survey on Canvas, right? Because we were trying to figure out, are students using Canvas on their computers or on their phones? And I think it was like 20% do it all on their phone, which is astonishing. Because yeah, I'm with you. I don't know how you can. I try to do my grading on the phone, and after about 3, I'm done.
I can attest to that by the essays.
Are they text speak? Yeah. No, it's amazing, and yet, but that may be where we see the textbooks being used.
That's what they can afford. Some of my students have their laptops, but of course they don't need them in class. But I do have one with his ebook. He just loves it on this.
And that's exactly it. That's what a lot of students they just that's all they have. They don't have a computer. Yeah, so Rob's saying a lot of students view the resources just on their phone. That's what we're seeing more and more for all of the online modalities, is the laptop is kind of old tech now, which makes me so sad.
The idea of going to a bigger phone, but now that I see students reading their textbooks on a phone, I'm like, oh, I kind of get phones getting bigger and bigger because they're getting smaller and smaller and bigger and bigger, and I have small hands. But it's pretty cool with it being a little bigger.
I'm waiting for the phone and the laptop size to switch over. But yeah.
I have a laptop where you can make calls and receive calls, which is
right.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a continuum, and
yeah,
that's
it is overlapping already.
It is. And the one thing to consider was interesting, actually. Our one of our senators, Christy Trollinger, for those that are here, sent me a journal article where they looked at how do students learn when reading digitally versus on paper, right? And they do like to read digitally, so if you ask them what they like, digital they like more. They do learn broad strokes digitally very well, but if they're learning the details, the paper is important. And so that's something to consider, to encourage students to at least print out some pieces of the book for those things that you really want them to focus on.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I can forward you the article. It was very interesting.
Just library related thing. So like libraries did a huge push for ebooks because we thought everyone would want to use ebooks, and that's exactly what we learned is, yeah, they're convenient, but you don't necessarily learn as well. So we already made that mistake.
Where do you learn that? Been there, huh?
Yeah, we still do both, but
it's interesting.
You can in Canvas just put your materials in Canvas rather than giving them the paper. The ones that they need to have the paper. And
right.
They can read it
yes,
Well,
it's
tactile and visual.
It's tactile and visual, and I wonder how much of it is the ability to like highlight and actually, because a lot of students don't know they can highlight on the screen. So I don't know if they looked at that. That may be a separate question, but that is a part of it.
Because you can highlight and bookmark in ebooks.
You can, but I don't think students know that.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I've had some ask me how to use the ebook, and I show them how to navigate using it at home. But they just need a quick lesson how to navigate and how to use those tools. You're right. I don't think they know that on that.
We actually just started some workshops for students on how to use ebooks, and Rachel's doing those through CAS. So that's a really helpful thing if you're doing a lot of ebooks, to maybe encourage them to go to those workshops. Okay, last little bit of student data. 83% prefer to keep their book in their major and 41% in other courses. So a lot of students want to keep their books. And that's the other nice thing about Open is they can, right? So you can download it and keep it forever. So that is another advantage. Oh, and this little statement at the bottom here, if you look at overall data that we have from our college databases, however that works, if you compare the cost of tuition to the cost of textbooks, textbooks actually are a little bit more. Not a lot more, but still more than tuition, which seems a little odd to me. Especially because, just kind of personal pride, tuition is the money they pay to listen to me. Textbook is the money they pay to read somebody else's stuff. I think I'm more important. So that's why that bothered me so much. It's like, I want to be the most expensive piece of their education. But next
well,
question.
and a book's not enough a lot of times. They need to hear what we have to say, which supplements the book, explains what's in the book.
Exactly. If the book was enough, then exactly. And even if, you know, online, if all those online MOOCs and things were enough, and they're not, they need that one-to-one kind of connection. All right, so the big question, right? Quality. Are these books any good? Because free is great, but if they're not good, then it's not worth it. In the assignment for next week, so not this week's assignment, but next week's assignment, you're going to read some of the research that has been done comparing traditional books to OER books. And overall, just going to get to the end of the story. Sorry to give away. This is like spoiler alert. You never want to watch TV shows with me because I like to know how they end. So the outcome is there's no significant difference overall. Like if you look at all of the different studies, most of them will show a slight advantage to OER. Some of them will show no advantage. Some will show a slight disadvantage. But if you average that all out, the studies more or less all show there's not much of a difference. So, but that's good though, right? So $100 for the same learning outcomes as $0. That to me seems like the kind of the big win. But what's interesting though is when you do see a difference, and this was a study out of British Columbia, and when you do see a difference, it's generally in favor of OER more often than not. But let me explain what this graph is showing. So the red bars are well, let me back up. The way they designed this study is they had a bunch of psychology classes. I think it was psychology, but they had a lot of large lecture. One group of lecturers got the traditional book only. That's the red bars. One group got the open textbook in both digital and print. That's the yellow bar. And then one got the open book in digital form only. That's the green. So they're comparing traditional to open, either print or digital. And for most of the exams, so exams 2 and 3, there was no significant difference. So we got a few comments in the chat. Let me pause and read those. Oh, okay, thank you. So comments and questions from the audience are not audible, so those of you that are going to ask, if you could use your Opera voices, that would be good, or I will repeat them. 5 years ago, the OER were thin and low quality. Now we have more of them and at much better quality, especially in business communication. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And that's true in a lot of different fields. So about 6 years ago, there were 0 open textbooks for biology, and now there are 3. And so the field is growing very, very quickly. And you're absolutely right. The early ones were first editions and the quality wasn't all that great. But now as we're moving to second and third editions, the quality is increasing significantly. Which is also one other thing that, thank you for reminding me. When we get to the searching, if you don't find resources for your class, try again in 6 months, try again in a year, because they're continually being built. I'm on a bunch of different OER listservs, and it seems like every week someone sends, oh, I wrote a new resource about whatever. And so keep checking back.
Can I ask Alfred Copian, I hope I'm saying the name right, which book he uses for business communication? Because I looked a few years ago, there wasn't anything. I'm going to look again. So I'd like to know which one he was.
Fabulous. Alfred, so we have one of our business instructors here. If you could share what book you're using, she would be really interested to know that. So I'll let you put that in the chat there. Oh, even better. He wrote his own book.
Right Business.
Right Business. So maybe we could search, and I will email you if that's okay, and we'll get the two of you together via email.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Already making connections. This is great. Cool. So, yeah. So if we're comparing open textbooks to other textbooks, exams 2 and 3, no difference. Exam 1, the traditional textbook did not do as well. And this is the P up there is it's statistically significant. So what, why?
Didn't buy it. Right.
They haven't bought it yet. First exam, right, takes 2 weeks for financial aid, 4 weeks maybe, depending, right? Book at the bookstore has a 5-day turnaround time. I haven't gotten it yet. I don't have the money right now. I'll have to wait until my paycheck at the end of the month. And that is probably what's happening there. They didn't ask those students if they bought the book or not, but that seems like a reasonable hypothesis.
Suzanne,
Mm-hmm.
do you know if there's been any tests done? Because the textbook companies that I am aware of are pushing not their textbooks so much anymore, but their digital online components, like McGraw-Hill's Connect and those types of things. Has anybody shown that those are valuable enough insofar as learning to justify the cost?
Excellent question. So the question was, if you're looking beyond just textbooks, one of the things that the publishers state is that the online ancillaries, such as the LearnSmart and all of those, add enough value to make it worth those purchases. And has there been any studies on that? So there have been studies about those online. What's the word?
Adaptive learning.
Thank you. Adaptive learning. So there have been studies. Adaptive learning does provide a benefit. So yes, there is an advantage to that. At the very last workshop, we'll talk about ancillaries for open resources. So those ancillaries are available for open resources. The cost is not free, but usually much cheaper. So for example, in our biology, we have folks using a free textbook and then an adaptive learning platform that costs, I think, $45. They range from $25 to $45. That one's a pretty expensive one. They're usually right about $35. So much cheaper, but present.
And those are the ones that, we're going to talk about this next class. I'll just wait for this question.
Well, let me see what this, not all ancillaries are adaptive. That's true. So yeah, James mentioned that not all the ancillaries are adaptive. That is true. There's other ancillaries that are just, test banks and PowerPoints and all that sort of thing. So yeah, that's
I did look at one adaptive, and that's like when the student's reading, it picks up what they know for prior knowledge, it tests for that. And then according to the reading and how they do on some activities, where they should be in the book and that. And I thought that our students would find it very confusing to move through a book like that. And then even as computer literate as I am, I had a hard time getting back to any section of the book that I wanted to. It's like you're locked down into what that software decides you need in that section.
Right.
So I think some development needs to happen, I'm sure it will over time. And then again, just students and instructors getting used to working that way. But I think that makes sense to work that way for the benefit of the students. But yeah, navigating is still a challenge at this point.
It is, and that's, yeah, so that's a very good point about the ancillaries, so both James's point and your point about the ancillaries for open are not as swishy as the publisher ancillaries.
Oh, I was talking about a publisher.
Oh, okay, so that you're saying it was almost too swishy. It took you exactly to where you wanted to go, and then
it moved me around, and I didn't have any control. And as an instructor, I know what I'm doing, so I wanted to go certain places. Our students may not; they may just go with how they
follow it.
But I thought they would need, our students would need a certain amount of digital literacy before they could use a textbook like that and feel comfortable with it.
Yes, and that is true. So some of the publisher ancillaries are overbuilt enough to where they're almost too difficult for the students to use.
Like, they're too smart.
They're too smart. Exactly. Yeah, and that is a decision. You know, it's worth looking at the different kinds and seeing what one works best for you and your students. One of the nice things about the way that, one of the really cool things, and I'm going to go off topic for just a second here, but one of the really cool things that the open movement has done is it's brought publishers a new way of looking at how do we want to make money, right? And that's fine. That is their business model. There's nothing wrong with that. And so what a lot of the publishers are starting to do is build the ancillaries for the free textbooks, and then they can charge that as a much lower rate. And quite a lot of the publishers are doing that. And that's where you can still get some of those. I don't know if LearnSmart is one. I know Cengage has one that can be used kind of with any book. So they're already making those changes because they have to stay in business too. So it's been kind of a neat way to see where can they add value and still keep the cost reasonable. Okay. There we go. So this is the same study out of British Columbia. And they also asked the students, which book do you like better? And just a reminder, the yellow, which won out overall, is the open in both print and digital format. The green is the open in digital only, and the red is the traditional. So the question becomes, is the writing in the open textbook really that much more engaging, right? And again, they didn't ask these types of questions, but my personal hypothesis is it's probably as engaging, but it feels better because it was free, right? That's my kind of cynical take on it. What's that?
Pocketbook bias.
Exactly, pocketbook bias.
And does that last the whole semester though? Like the first few weeks?
You know, I don't know when they asked this. I would guess this was towards the end. If they asked it, I would hope so. But you're right. If they asked early versus late, there was actually a really cool study at the conference that I went to out of Oregon. A person there did a study where he had half of his students use an open book, half use a traditional book, and he asked them at the start and the end of the semester their perception about open versus traditional books. And at the start of the semester, all of the students, I think regardless of group more or less, said, well, the traditional book is going to be better. You know, this is a free thing, like this isn't going to be very good. At the end of the semester, regardless of which group they were in, it had flipped. They had all thought that the open book was better. I think because the traditional group students had kind of this feeling of, well, my book is really pricey and it wasn't all that great maybe. But it was a really interesting, over time, there is a shift in perception towards open, more favorably towards open. Nope. Comments. Excellent. So from Sandy, for anyone interested in low-cost text ancillaries that they call OER, especially in your discipline course, or course doesn't have many existing OER options, check out those from Lumen Learning and Cengage. Yeah, Lumen has done a really wonderful job of packaging courses so that the instructor doesn't have to work as hard. And you know, full disclosure, the workshop I went to was from Lumen, right? So I'm kind of biased, but they did a really nice job making the resources easy for instructors to use and fairly cheap for students. There's a $25 and a $35 version where the course is more or less built for you and you can change what you do with it. We have an instructor here that's using one of their courses and she really likes it. So they did a good job. Cengage absolutely has been one of the publishers that really has embraced the open movement and asked the question, what can we add? How can we add value and keep our business model reasonable?
Can I ask a question about that, Suzanne?
Absolutely.
So Lumen, when you say $35 option and you get their course, is it sort of like modules that go into Canvas, or is it like we would think of a textbook?
Excellent. So what Lumen has done is they've actually taken existing textbooks, and so you can get those for free, and then they've built Canvas courses out of them. So it's a fully built out Canvas course with modules, and the textbook is built in. It's got at the beginning of each module something like well, I don't know what they call it. What do I know? Right. So it's a little quiz at the beginning, and then it guides students to areas of the textbook. There's discussions. There's quizzes at the end. So it's a pretty solid course that they've built.
Okay, thanks. Fantastic.
So from Rob, it seems to me that the publisher textbooks are more like academic research projects where teacher-developed resources keep the students and how they want to teach more in mind. Yeah, it's interesting. The publisher textbooks, always, you can tell who reviewed the publisher textbooks because there's always these weird little bits like, oh, this was reviewed by somebody that thought this was really important. At least in the biology fields. I don't know how it is in others, but yeah, it tends to have a lot of information, whereas the resources that we've developed, yeah, we know our students, and we do tend to build really nice resources for them. And that's one of the really cool things about open as well that we're going to get to in a minute is it allows for collaboration. So in the child development department, I think you're talking about coming together and building resources together, right? In psychology, there was a project called the NOVA Project where a bunch of psychology instructors got together and wrote test banks and wrote the textbook, and you know, what a wonderful way to collaborate. And that's how a lot of these resources get written.
So are colleges giving stipends or release times to instructors who are doing this? Because this is on top of teaching and everything else we're already doing?
It is. So generally, no. So some of the colleges have grants. We have a grant, so we can offer stipends for some of that, and we can talk offline about that. The other thing that's being discussed is if that work can go into evaluations. So that may be something to take to the union. Is how can this be something, because this is above and beyond your job, and it is something that you're doing for students. There should be some place in the evaluation process that gets a little bit of a bump. I think here it would be pretty easy to at least write it in, you know, the existing format is fine. But at the research universities, that's a really big discussion they're having. Is does this count towards tenure? And that is for them to decide. But it you know, it should.
Well, that faculty are required to publish, so.
Right. Does that count as publishing?
Yeah, does that count?
It's an interesting discussion what's happening there. All right, so last little bit from the BC study. Overall, students like the open and print best, so we're going to move past that. When we asked our students here, so what we did for this study is classes that were using open textbooks for the first time, at the end of the semester, we had them give their students a survey, and we asked them a bunch of questions. Starting at the bottom, for all of the questions that asked students about how much they liked the book, you know, did it help them learn, was it well organized, 81 to 94% said that yes, it did, it was fine. The one that I thought was interesting was when we asked students, how often do you read this book? And then we asked them, in other classes, how often do you read those books? And in the OER class, they said they read their book 2 to 3 times a week. So 47% said they read their book 2 to 3 times a week. But in other classes, a lot less of them read it more often. So why? 1, half of them didn't buy it. So that's probably what those numbers are. But 2, one of the things I found in my classes with the option of both digital and print is they break out their phone in their, you know, in their break on work, or they're doing whatever. So they do tend to read it a lot more often if it's easily available. Okay. And overall, the students did think that the open book was easy to use, and this was asked of a number of different classes that were using open books for the first time, and that's important because we all know the first time we do anything in a class, it can be a little bit challenging. Most of them read it on PDF, but again, 25% said they wanted it they read it on a printer copy, so they printed it at home or they bought one at the bookstore. So print is still really important.
Was the question framed in terms of age? Because I'm wondering if older people wanted the print copy and the 20-somethings are fine with it just being digital?
That's a really great question. We didn't get down to that level. So the comment was there a relationship to age? So was it that older folks wanted the print copy, whereas younger folks were more comfortable with the digital copy? And we did not get to that level of granularity. Yeah, it would. This.
Of course, there are exceptions to that.
But yes. Well, there's a lot of really great research that is yet to be done. I mean, this is a new field, and there's a lot of really good research questions to ask about how OER relates to learning, and those are being done, and we will look at those research papers in next week. All right. When we asked faculty that used the OER book for the first time, so this is, again, first time they were using the OER book, at the end of the semester, we gave them a survey. Almost all of them said that they would definitely or likely use the book again. It did take some time to prepare, so most said that it took the same amount of time to prepare. It was easy to integrate, encouraged them to reflect on their teaching practices, and was as good or better. So from the faculty perspective, changing to a new book is still changing to a new book. Like, you know, we have to be honest about this. Changing to a new book takes time. It takes work. You have to redo all of your stuff. But it wasn't significantly more difficult because it was an OER than if you had changed to a different textbook.
Suzanne, I have another question.
Yes.
I was wondering, it's sounding like for most other, I'm in English, but for most other, like especially STEM areas, that y'all are using one textbook that one or a series of authors collaborated together on. I was finding what I was doing as I was putting together one was I was pulling chapters of materials from different areas. So I'm wondering about this labor here, like open textbooks take the same amount of time. Is that because most of the folks who were doing it were in STEM and you're not going to want to pick and choose? Am I understanding it right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So the areas that we had was, STEM and psychology. I think there was one business, but yes, all of them had a book, a textbook, which is, yeah, absolutely very different for English, I think, than any other area, right? Even government and history and all of those tend to have a textbook.
Well, I mean, I'm second thinking it. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be that way with English. I mean, what was happening for me, though, is that somebody would do a really good thing, say in critical thinking on fallacies, but they would not have a really good chapter in that same resource for media literacy. And so I would have to pull media literacy from a different resource than fallacies. And it's sounding like that's not what happens as much in STEM.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, all of the biology textbooks are almost identical. This has always been a source of great irritation for me. They all cover it all exactly the same way with the same pictures. So yeah.
Okay, well, that's just a question I'm going to hold then as we go through these workshops. Like, how is English different, and can we figure something else out? So it's because it was a lot of labor for me. I wouldn't have answered that question in the same way. It did take me more time.
Yeah. And that is a very good point. Yes. This was a very small sample size, and thank you. Yeah, keep reminding me about the different areas, because one of the things that's been really interesting for me, just kind of personally, I come from, my science classes, and that's always been my framework. As I'm starting to work with different areas of the campus, just learning what's important to different areas. It's been astonishing. So yes, please keep reminding me about that, because I fall back into my old habits.
Cool. Thank you, Suzanne.
So from Alfred, I have a lot of younger students who opt to buy the hard copy of the bookstore instead of download the PDF. So even younger students like the print. And I've seen that too. I think it's kind of what Rachel was saying. overall people like that tactileness. And so it is important. That's one of the things I kind of keep as we're having these discussions across campus, keep reminding folks that yes, open is digital, but make sure students can also get some print copies because that is important to them. And then, yep.
Can the open be read on readers like Nook and Kobe and these others?
It depends on, so the different open publishers will provide different formats. All of them will have PDF, almost all of them will have PDF. Many of them will have the other book publisher, the Kindles and the whatever else is, yep. So I'm gonna skip this slide because we're running a little bit behind and I wanna make sure to have enough time for the next presentation. So what I want to end with here, though, is we've been talking a lot about cost and how cost affects students, but it has to be more than just that it's free. Open is different than free, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next week, is open gives you all of these other options beyond just cost. One is you can customize it. So Heather, just like you were saying, you can pull different chapters together and create the book of your dreams, right? You aren't tied to the one book. The other nice thing is, back to the 5 things you can do with open. One is students can download it and keep it forever, which is great for reference type things. But what I think is even more interesting is if you give them the link to the current book, whenever that's updated, they will always have the most current edition. And so, in a field like in medical fields or in computer fields where, your Office 2003 textbook is all sorts of useful, right? What's more useful is the link to the new information. And that's one of the nice things about using open. Another comment here. Maybe students have been trained to feel like a book is where the content for their test can be found. It's true. It's interesting. But yeah, that is how we kind of, how education has been, is like, here's the thing you're learning. I mean, between these 2 covers, this is it. Which is an interesting way to think about what message does that send in the age of the internet. But that is a whole other discussion that I would love to have at some point. Okay. Students will have access to the book right away. This one's really important. So no more excuses, no more, financial aid, book is back ordered, all of these other excuses. You have the book right now. Go to the computer lab, print out the pages that you need, right? Whatever it takes. There's no reason you can't start. So we don't have to wait 2 weeks to start actually teaching, right? Opportunities for collaboration, right? We can work together. This was out of, I can't remember what group this was. So this was British Columbia again. They had a PowerPoint where it showed a bunch of folks got together, psychology departments, and just wrote a bunch of test questions. Like, how fun. Sorry, maybe not for everybody. Wouldn't that be awesome? You could sit around and write test questions. And it also provides new opportunities for learning. So back to the idea of, oh, sorry, Barry's got to go. Bye, Barry. Oh, you're not making dinner for the rest of us, though. All right, well then, hope it's a lovely dinner. So back to the idea of, the kind of the old format of teaching is, here's the giant tome, here's what you're learning. OER allows us to kind of break away from that and think about what exactly is it we want them to learn, right? And so in the 4th week, we'll look at open pedagogy, which is a way to get students to think about learning beyond just the thing they memorize. All right, so let me stop sharing for a bit. What we have next is Rachel, our librarian, has a presentation about how open affects libraries and other areas. So I'm going to step aside and let her set up. And while she's doing that, if anyone has questions, we can.
Uh-oh. How do I
Yeah,
share
the meeting, not that one.
this one?
And then share screen. And then probably this.
Oh, right there. Okay. Where did the little chat? Where did that
You
go?
go to the dots and then chat.
Oh, okay.
Disappears every time you do something.
Oh, I know. Uh-oh. Nope. Dang it. Ah. Oh. Okay. Can everyone see my presentation?
I can see it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about another aspect of open, which is the librarians will probably be aware of this because we deal with it a lot in our jobs, which is open access. And it's kind of it's an area that is really important, but a lot of people don't know about as far as the details. And basically academic publishing and some of the challenges with that and how the open movement has helped. Oops. Okay, so as a librarian, you know, part of my job is basically giving you access to information for your research, for your classes, whatever it is you're doing, information that's not necessarily freely available to you online, but that the library gets for you. And one thing specifically are scholarly journals, so research, when you have your students do research, when you do your own research. It's becoming more difficult to provide access to this type of resource.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I teach human biology at night, and we assign to research papers. So, you know, can somebody from library, or maybe you can come at night and give them like an overview of how to research papers online?
Yeah, let's talk after,
Okay,
and I'm sure we can arrange something.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. The question was if a librarian can come and teach in a class, and yes, the answer. So, so just more specifically, what is the issue? And like I said, the librarians will know all about this. There's at least 2 in our group. So we have a very small budget to provide what we need to provide. And journals, just like textbooks, inflation is astronomical. There's also the changing methods of publication. So when stuff is moved online instead of just print, that means that we have to pay for this content with subscriptions with money that we don't really have enough of. So it's just challenging to get those resources to you. And at a community college, it's not kind of as pressing an issue as far as having access to like the latest research and journal, you know, articles. But for, say, big research institutions, even places like Harvard, it's a much bigger issue because you need what is current and all the information that's available. So what do librarians worry about? We want to provide you information without you knowing what we do in the background, basically. But it's not as easy as it seems. So that you don't necessarily know about our struggles. That's, in a way, a good thing, because it means we're doing our job. Yeah. Okay, so kind of more about the issue. like I said, with everything going online and becoming digital, the technology has really changed, and we thought that that would change the way we shared information and make prices decrease, but it's actually made things in a lot of ways harder for people to access because there's still that block as far as cost and sharing, which is where open can come in. Come on.
Yeah, the arrows don't work for some reason. You have to use the mouse.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's actually a really complicated issue, which you're going to learn all about publishing and libraries now, but it's something that I'm really interested in and passionate about. So what are the issues? So in the traditional publishing model, like the academic publishing model, how it works is a lot of times the government provides money for research. So we teach at public institutions, instructors, or maybe government institutions, the research is getting funded. But the researchers, besides being part of their job, they don't get compensation for their research as far as when they publish. It's just part of what they do, you know, as part of their profession. So they don't get paid to hand over their research to publishers. The information is peer reviewed, and that's also not paid. So they're not getting any compensation, but the publishing companies get a whole lot of money for basically free labor. So a lot of times the editors work for, depending on, you know, the size of the publishing company, the peer reviewers don't get paid. And you're writing papers that are part of, say, the tenure process, but you're not necessarily getting paid to publish. It'd be nice if you could get paid every time you had to do that, but it's not how it works. So though researchers are doing something for a public good because they're sharing knowledge, it's not available to the public that's actually paid for it. So remember, it's government funded, publicly funded, but public can't actually access it without paying lots of money. All right. Okay, so copyright comes in too, because when you publish, you transfer copyright to the publisher. You don't retain the rights to your work. So journals retain copyright, which restricts the access to the articles, so the information can't be found or shared without paying a lot of money. And just one example is if you go online to try to find, say, an article that you would really need for your research or maybe to teach your class, if you didn't go through the library database, it would cost on average about $45. I think that's probably the average. So just to read, you know, say a 12-page article online that's a huge cost. It's like the cost of some textbooks. One of the other problems is publishing companies have monopolies. So in an open access journal, which is a freely available journal, PLOS ONE, which is one of the biggest, I think it probably is the biggest, most well-known, authors analyzed 45 million documents in the Web of Science from 1973 to 2013, and they found that for the year 2013, the top 5 publishers accounted for more than 50% of what was published. So there's a huge monopoly, which is why they can charge so much money. You have a question?
Yeah, I teach at Chico State, so the professors are under pressure to publish
Right.
their research. So I did my master's with my supervisor, and he wanted to publish. And we got an email that, oh, you can publish with us, it's an online journal. And we sent everything to them. They said, oh, pay us $1,000 and we'll publish. I was like, oh.
Yeah, so I will be talking about that. So the question was, you did some work and you wanted to publish and you actually were asked to pay to publish something. So there's 2 different ways that that can happen, and I'll talk about both of them. Okay, like I said too, journal inflation, and this is just the average inflation is 6%, as opposed to the growth in funding. But for specific journals and for like really well-known journals, inflation can be astronomical. I think I have a few examples. So a lot of times it's much more than 6%. Okay, so publishers are in business to make a profit, most of them. So how do they do this? And basically what they do is they can sell you bundles. So when we buy subscriptions to products through the library, there might be one journal that we really want from a publisher, like a really well-known journal that's used a lot. And they won't sell that to us individually. They'll sell it in a bundle with a lot of other stuff that we don't necessarily want. And then if we want to try to buy that journal title individually, we suddenly find that the price is more than the bundle. So that's problematic. They also do things like have embargo. So like for science, for STEM research, you want to have the most recent research, but a lot of times there's an embargo or a waiting period for that research to be available for what you purchase. So you might have to wait a year or 18 months for the price that you've paid to actually see that research. There's also some, I guess you would call it, creative ways to limit and to make money. So for example, Harvard Business Review, their top 500 articles, the top 500 that people most want to read, you can view them online, but there's no way to save them, print them, or like permanently link to them for students. And believe me, when this happened, the librarians tried absolutely everything to try to make it work, and they figured out how to not let you print or save, and that's detrimental to students who are trying to learn. If you want to actually be able to do those things, you would have to pay lots of money.
Would it work in a software, I think it's like a web aggregator that people use for graduate degrees, like Mendeley, where you could actually save the link so that you could use it in your paper and have the citing done? So you'd be able to access it online, though you couldn't print the whole article in paper, but you still have online access.
Yeah, so you would have access, you just couldn't save it or link to it or print it.
But I mean, it could be saved through Mendeley. The link would be saved and you can always get to it.
Like I said, I'm pretty, like we tried it and it didn't, because you're accessing it through like our subscription. So the link didn't work.
You've got a Machiavellian strategy in place.
Yeah, and there's a special, way that you access journals.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah. So a couple other ways are sharing can be limited. So libraries like to share stuff through interlibrary loan, and journals can choose if they want to be able to do that or not. And also prices are negotiated. No one school really pays the same price necessarily for the same material. So if you are trying to purchase something from Harvard, who has like huge amount of money, it would be way more than say Butte College trying to purchase the same information. And that's usually, those costs are usually hidden. They're not like advertised, you can't go find it. So there's no competition. There's no way to, it's hard to negotiate lower prices. A question? Yeah. Oops.
Well, it sounds like they are moving away from providing
Why is
the
it
books
doing
because
this?
we're moving to OER, and now they are charging for the digital part of information.
Sorry, it's driving me crazy.
They're figuring out. I mean, it's amazing how they're figuring out strategies.
Okay. Come on. Okay, so all these problems, what is the solution? Oops. So So one solution that is similar to OER is called open access. And this is basically the research that's published is free and open. So people can view it. There's no license, copyright, basically protecting it from the public having access to it. And this is good because it accelerates research, it puts the knowledge out there. There's also open data where you can open up your data to people, not just open access. So it's a similar movement to OER. So how does it work? Mostly it's open access publishing, so journals, instead of being behind a paywall and requiring a subscription, they're just open, published. Anyone from the public can go look at PLOS ONE, any of the other open access journals. There's also digital repositories, so you can put your information in a repository that can be viewed by other people. A lot of times they're discipline specific. So if you do research, you want to put it out there before you publish it, you can do that. You can also retain the rights to your publication. You don't have to give them to the publishing company or the publisher. And also a lot of local, national, and international policies are being developed to promote open, just kind of like OER. We want the information to be freely available to share with everyone.
I think you've got another question.
Another question? So the similarity is that it's open and that everyone can, so open access journal articles use a Creative Commons license. So it's an open license that's not copyright protected. So the open part is the same. The access part just refers specifically to journals and the academic publishing model. Does that answer the question? Okay. It can be kind of confusing. Okay, so this kind of answers the question. So you can publish in an open access journal. That's always an option when you publish. Articles are free and there's no copyright barriers. So again, anyone can go and look at your work. So the license is the same as a lot of OERs, CC BY. You just have to give credit to who published the information or who wrote the information.
Good question. A lot of the journal articles I read are funded by various governmental grants, and to fund the research, and of course the paper is essentially a synopsis of the research. How is it they can still? It would seem to me that if it's coming from government money, that it should be free to the public, that it essentially paid for research to begin with.
Right. So so the question was, a lot of research is funded by governmental grants, and so shouldn't that information be free to the public? So sometimes it is if it's published by a government publisher, but like that's part of the whole problem is these companies are, to publish your work, you have to do it through a very limited publishing model. It has to be through, a lot of times you want to find the best journal in your field that you can get into, and those are all, not all, it's changing a bit, but for profit publishing companies, same with textbooks. So there's a huge flaw in the model, and that's what the open access is trying to fix. So like I said, there's open access journals, but there's also institutional or digital repositories. And these, what you can do is they make your work open they're basically open archives, which means that people can find your work, because if it's on the internet but no one can find it, that's kind of pointless. So this is more librarian stuff. We want you to be able to find the information that you need. So there's metadata and findability things that help you get to that information. So you can publish, or you can put your work in one of these regardless of if you publish in a like traditional journal later, and it's still available for everyone to see. There's a directory of open access repositories, so you can see, like I said, some of them are discipline specific. You can put your work in there. Do you have a question?
So, yeah, before we publish, if we want to deposit in our work, is this still going to be peer reviewed, or just like, is it?
So it's before that process generally. Yeah. So the question was, is it still going to be peer reviewed? It depends on, basically it depends on what you do, like the factors. So if you want the information out there, then you can put it in one of these, and then you can still go through the traditional publishing model. And so a lot of times you'll have like a pre-published version that you put in, and then you can publish it later through a journal. So another thing you can do, and when we talk about licenses, we'll have more information about this, but you can choose not to transfer your copyright to the journal. I don't actually know anyone that's negotiated with a journal to retain their rights and how effective it is, but it's an option. So you don't have to go the traditional way and just hand over your work to a publisher. You can retain it. So also there are policies that are being developed to promote open access. I think the UK has a huge open access policy that the government is involved in trying to get the universities on board. So we want to encourage public institutions in general to promote this type of publishing. I know some big schools have that have money, they require you to actually publish open, to put your work in a repository. It's part of the whole process. Okay, so these are just a few resources and examples. So there's a directory of open access journals that has all the information that you would want to see about a journal. So what's the peer review process? How rigorous is it? What type of licensing info? Are there fees involved? Are they asking you to publish or to pay to publish? What the editorial information is? Like I said, there's a directory of open access repositories where you can see if your field or your institution has something that you can publish in or put your work in.
Rachel, I just want to confirm, these slides are available on Canvas where the hyperlinks work?
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't have to, yeah. Yeah.
Just gonna ask.
Yeah, so it should be linked to the Google Doc.
Can we use these sort of, if you want us to profile,
let me answer that in a minute.
So the question was, are these slides linked in the Canvas course? And yes, they are. So for each module, there should be the presentation and then a link for the slides. So I just have a couple other examples of, there's digital libraries, +ONE, the Public Library of Science. There's a humanities version, and then there's individual journals that are also open. So you can find, most of the time, open access journals for your discipline. So +ONE is a huge science one. It's actually really prestigious to be published in that journal. And the cost is reflective of that. +ONE. Yeah. So it's not a perfect system. Open access does have some flaws. One of the huge ones is because it's open and people aren't making a profit, you might have to pay a fee to publish. So not all journals charge a fee, but some of them do. It can be a very steep fee, and this is to make up for basically the lack of like the publishing company making a profit. You still have work to do to publish a journal. But just be aware that some publishers will try to charge you to make your article open, but they're still making a profit. So a lot of times, if you publish in a journal, they'll give you the option to pay more to make your specific article open, but then they're still allowing it to be published and making a profit off of it because the whole journal isn't open, if that makes sense. So they're actually taking money from you and making money in a different way. You can sometimes get a waiver or a grant. Some colleges offer that, some institutions offer that. And that's what the Directory of Open Access Journals will give you information for the specific journal, what type of process is involved in the publishing. So to get back to your question, one of the things that has happened with the rise of open access journals is that there's also been predatory journals, which basically, so what is a predatory journal? They try to make money of the open access system of paying to get your article published. But they're not legitimate journals. They're not, they're in it specifically to make money. So be very wary of that. It's usually pretty transparent if it's a predatory journal as opposed to a well-known journal or something that's legitimate.
And if it's not, ask your librarian. I'm sure.
Yes, and you can, like, librarians know about this and will be able to see what type of journal it is. And that's also for the Directory of Open Access Journals. There used to be lists of predatory journals, but there's so many legal entanglements that that stopped. But just know that it's out there. And so if you're looking to publish, if someone is coming to you and asking you to publish in their journal, it's probably questionable.
I think they were off I think they're in China or somewhere else. They're not from here.
Yeah.
You could see from the names. You know,
Yeah. It's, like I said, it's kind of easy to see, but I know people that have actually published in them before. So also they don't follow the standards like peer review, the whole editorial process. So just remember, if you're looking to publish, that journal information should be transparent. The whole process of peer review, what they charge, if they charge anything, it should all be on their website, easy to find. They should be upfront about it. You can check the Directory of Open Access Journals to see what type of reputation your journal has, or you can ask a librarian. We'll be able to find out for you. A lot of times we'll just know, just because we deal with journals so often, we'll be able to tell you. So just something to leave you to think about with regards to knowledge and information. So there's something called information privilege, which is basically who has the privilege of knowing and having access to information and knowledge. So by limiting access, by having all this new knowledge out there, but having it behind a paywall, basically, who are we harming and who are we helping? So people with money and the know-how will always be able to find that information. You'll know, go to the library and ask. If you're in a developed country, you'll know the ways to do that. A lot of times it's people in places that don't have access to information, in countries that, you know, have been at war or just don't have money, their knowledge is very limited, but having it freely available online, we can open it up and have it available to everyone, people who need it most, but also that's how new discoveries happen. We want to share the information. Are there any questions?
Is that specific to journals, or is that happening also with the videos that we have access in the database from the
Open access is specifically journals, but there's like the open movement is for everything basically. But I don't know specifically anything about videos. I know that a lot of like archives and collections have become open and freely available. The libraries do a lot of work with that sort of thing. It's just a matter of time and money usually, if it can happen.
All right, so
how do I?
That's right. Okay, sorry. No, thank you. Thank you for that. Oh, I see. That's good. Okay, so are there any last questions before we wrap up? I know we're a few minutes over, and I thank you for those that are online. Thank you for your patience. I apologize for the technical issues in the beginning. I will. Oh, last bit. Make sure you signed up if you want Flex. There was the Google form, and other than that, I think that's about it. If there are no other questions, have a lovely week and see you next Friday.
Can you review our homework again?
Oh yeah, the homework. So the homework for this this first week is in the first module. There is a list of tutorials. Now that was different than the databases she was talking about here. They're not research article databases. The Google form is at the very top of the chat. So if you scroll up to the very top, it is the first link in the chat there. So the homework is to go to one of the tutorials and review it. So if you let me show you Canvas. Let's share. No, that's our. Oh nope, that's not the one. Hold on, let me try again.
It's just there's a link for a training exercise, and I thought maybe that was one.
It might have. Let me.
Training material.
Yes, so it's called Review of Training Materials. That is the right one. Yep.
Okay.
Good. Any questions from, Zoa, did you find the Google form?
And so,
do you want me to pull up the Canvas class? We could do that. Let's do that.
not for me.
No? Okay.
All the resources listed at the bottom are ones we can use for our homework, right?
Yeah, so let me pull that up actually. No, that's all right. So if we go to modules in the, oops, where'd my chat go? Yes, okay, good.
Do we have a Google shared group?
We don't. So if you have your own Google Drive, just link us to your document for the review. What you can do, so here we're in the Canvas course. No, so yeah, so here's the first unit. The exercise is what we're calling the homework. Okay, and then you're going to pick one of those links. And this is actually a page you can edit. So you can, what's nice about Canvas is you can make pages editable by students. So you edit it, add your name, that's a hyperlink to your review. Does that make sense? So you're going to write your review somewhere outside, say in a Google Doc, and then here you're going to put the link to that review. Thank you. Excellent. All right. See you all. I'll see you next week. Thanks for coming by. Other questions? You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you. And we'll stay here and answer more questions. So feel free. Next week we're going to do some actual searches, so that'll be fun.
Okay, so you tell me again, I already got out. What is the link to this class? It's https://.
Canvas.instructure.com, so it's at the very top there.
Oh, there it is.
All right.
Thank you.
And thank you all for your patience and having to be the first 15 minutes twice.
We have, yeah, Brendan, and when you have the component of people at a distance, it's always the first.
Next semester, I actually, all 5 of my classes were.
Really? You found it for all of them?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
I did one this semester, and I really like it. It seems to be working well. The way my classes work anyway, that a lot of what I lecture on is what they are going to graded on. But I also have assignments where they have to go is read out of the textbook, answer questions. So I have that separate, and then the exams coming directly from my lectures.
So you must have been able to find actual textbooks then for yours.
There's actually a open source geography that just appeared recently because I've been searching for a while, and it's suddenly there, and it's just it's a bit unfortunate because one of the textbooks I'm going to be using is it has part of its name is not accurate as to what the course is, which is kind of ironic.
But the book itself is
book itself is perfect, so yeah.
Nor this name.
And, well, not perfect, but I'm going to use a lot of that, and I'm actually going to use another of an OER to fill in.
So that's a good tip because we should look at books that even sound vaguely like them.
Well, I think this was an error. I don't think it was.
So then what did they make you
Well, no,
read
it was talking about geography, and I can't remember the exact title, but then it said GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems. And I've been looking for Geographic Information System source. And so I went to it. Well, this doesn't have anything to do with GIS, but hey, this is a really good source for another class. So,
Where do you teach your GIS class? In which lab?
121 LRC.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne.
Uh-huh.
Great weekend. Bye,
You
everybody.
too.
Bye, Maggie. Are you doing a whole series?